From the studios of Foxboro Cable Access, located in the center of Foxborough, Massachusetts, you are watching Around Foxborough.
Hello, and welcome to Around Foxborough. I am Joe Sanders, your host. We have a very special guest today, Mr. Mark Small. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Joe. Nice to be here.
It's great to have you. By the way, Mark is from Foxborough, and but that's the very little part about Mark we're going to learn about today. Mark is actually an author, and I'm going to say a little bit about Mark. You're, I think, a mild guy, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to take some time and tell folks who this guy is. Mark Small began his career as a music journalist in 1982 and has written hundreds of articles for such periodicals as Guitar Player, Acoustic Guitar, Soundboard, Downbeat, and the Ralph Vaughan Williams Society Journal. He served as managing editor of Berklee Today magazine at Berklee College of Music for 26 years. He has released 9 albums and performed throughout the country with rock, jazz, and classical ensembles. He appeared in 3 international TV broadcasts with the Tabernacle Choir at the Temple Square in Salt Lake City, Utah. Now, I'm going to tell a little bit, Mark, before I turn it over to you. You know, I wrote some notes on this, and I started, I have a copy of, he recently has completed a book. It's right here, folks. You can see it's called Lee Burke, Leading the Berklee Way, and he'll talk about that little discussion. But I got this book as donated to me for some research on you, and I started looking through the book, and I looked at this one chapter, and I saw this one chapter title was Boston, You're My Home. I said, wait a minute, that's Dirty Water, the song by the Standells. I said, this is really good. And I probably read in preparation, a couple, 2 to 3 chapters for sure. I said, that's it. So I bought the book, I'm getting it tomorrow, and congratulations. I know it's a good book.
Thank you so much, Joe.
So anyway, Mark, why don't you take it away? Tell us about everything you want to, because I find it to be very interesting.
Okay, well, the story starts with me being a Berklee student back in the 70s, and then going my way professionally and doing other things, but ending up back at the school in 1989, or 1988 it was, on an assignment from Guitar Player magazine to do something on Berklee's guitar department.
Okay. Because
previous to that I was living in California, and I was the Los Angeles correspondent for Guitar Player magazine.
Okay.
And when I relocated to Boston, they assigned me to go to Berklee. And when I went there, I happened to meet Lee Burke's mother, who was the public affairs official there, Alma Burke. And she offered me a job working in her press office. And at that point, I'd been about 18 or 19 years into my music career. And
okay.
So a full-time job, having a family, a full-time job with benefits sounded pretty good to me. So I started, and to continue on, Lee Burke encouraged me when the position opened up to be editor of Berklee Today magazine. He encouraged me to apply for that, which said to me, I guess he had something in mind, even though he had some pretty impressive resumes on his desk to consider. But he hired me, and it was a delightful job, because I was interviewing the best and brightest from Berklee, whether they were guys from Aerosmith or top movie composers like Howard Shore, who did, the trilogy.
Wow.
Yeah, and Alan Silvestri, who did Forrest Gump and a bunch of other things, as well as classical composers, jazz composers, and everything. So it was a wonderful job for all that time. And I stayed friends with Lee Burke once he retired in 2004. And he reached out to me and said, he knew that I continued playing professionally and everything throughout. And he said, would you like to come out here? I'm producing a concert series in Phoenix. And so he invited me out to play a solo guitar concert, which I did. And when he listed off, these are the available dates we have, I just happened to pick out the concert for October 20th, 2023, without any seeming knowledge of why that would be a good one. I just thought it was at the beginning of their season, so I took it. Little did I know that was the concert was the day before Lee passed away very suddenly. And so, but ironically, the way this book comes about, to circle all the way back, Lee's wife, Susan Burke, had said to me right after the concert, Lee was very much with us and, for the next 24 hours. And she said, I've wanted to do kind of a little book about Lee's life. But you know, he's such a modest guy. He says, I'm not going to participate in that. And she said, you know, you've been affiliated with the college for all those years. You're a Berkeley alumnus. You're a writer. Would you help me write a book about him? Maybe just about 75 pages.
Okay.
Something they'd probably publish on Amazon. And so I told her, sure, I'll do that. We'll talk later. But then when Lee died suddenly the next day,
Oh my gosh.
it became more of an imperative to do a bigger thing than just a small family publication.
So it was kind of a random date that happened. I mean, he said, come on out, and you chose October, and it just happened to be, wow, that's powerful.
Yeah, it was, you know, and as I was leaving the morning of the 21st, Lee and his wife Susan picked me up and dropped me to the...
5 o'clock in the morning, as I recall.
5 o'clock in the morning. It was bright and early. Lee was an early riser, and so Susan still is. And we had a very warm moment in the car where I just felt prompted that I should tell him how much I appreciated his friendship and all the break that he gave me to work at Berkeley, and how much his friendship had meant to me. And
Yeah.
most people think stuff like that but don't get to actually say it. Sometimes things happen and you don't get the chance. And when I heard that he had passed away, I was just so thankful that I had done that. Yeah. But as the limo approached, I got my bags and said goodbye to them. And then I was getting in the limo and I said, Lee, we never took a picture while I was here. So I had the limo driver take this picture. And we have the last picture.
That's in the book.
It's in the book, yeah, the very last picture that Lee was in.
Wow.
And so there was a little bit of inspiration happening there that last morning.
That's beautiful. Could you share, I think it's for the novice, if you will, that doesn't know Berkeley versus Berkeley, about how the college got named, and it might be obvious to everybody now, but some people think it's California. Why is that?
Well, you know, I'm not sure that it wasn't a subconscious thing when this name change happened. Lee's father, Lawrence Burke, founded Berkeley in 1945, and he had been a student of somebody who is a well-known music theorist and composer, Joseph Schillinger. Had people like George Gershwin as his students, and Lawrence Burke was a student of his. And he certified only 12 people. They called them the 12 disciples of the Schillinger method.
Wow.
And Lawrence Burke was one of them. And that was a pretty big credential in 1945 because Schillinger was very well thought of.
Yeah.
So Burke came to Boston and he opened his music studio, and then it became a school. And he opted to call it Schillinger House to capitalize on that credential he had. Mm-hmm. And then Joseph Schillinger passed away sometime in the late 40s. And Berkeley was moving away from the strict model of music theory and composition that Schillinger had. They thought it was time for a new name. And one of the faculty members came into Lawrence Burke's office and said, I had a dream last night that we should reverse the names of your son, Lee Burke, and call the school Berkeley. And Lawrence said, I like it, let's do it.
Oh my.
And I mean, everybody was aware of UC Berkeley in California.
Right. Right.
And so maybe that played in a little bit to this idea that it would resonate with people in the back of their mind, even though if they had the locations and the subject matters taught confused.
Yeah. I loved reading that in the book, how that came. You know, but isn't that kind of like typical of how some things really happen in life? I mean, you get events like that, and all of a sudden, boom, there's an idea, and it goes.
Right.
I made copies of different parts of the book, and like I already said about the stand-ills. I mean, I'm looking at. I highlighted chapter headings here. Boston, You're My Home. We talked about that. Lee Burke, Berkeley. That we talked about that. I saw a chapter on team players. Another one on befriending the community, the company you keep. It sounds like what my parents used to say to me. So I said, that was why I bought the book. I said, I got all these chapters I haven't read, and I'm not going to keep Jury Love's version of this book. She gets this back, so I got to get my own version. Tell us more. I mean, there's so much in here. Without giving away everything, but what were the poignant?
Maybe I'll say what's important about Lee Burke and why he deserves a biography.
Okay, great.
He was a very intelligent man, a quiet, unassuming person, and his father had started the music school, and it was a family business, and it's detailed in the book, but they were of Jewish heritage. Both Lee's mother, Alma Burke, Alma Schlager was her maiden name, and Lawrence Burke was originally Berkowitz was his name. And they lived inside a part of Russia where there was a lot of Jewish population, and they weren't treated well. And so a lot of those immigrants decided to make their way to America. And the Burkes ended up, and the Schlagers, not knowing each other. They were from different parts of this area called the Pale of Settlement, which is a very big thing. It's worth looking up. At any rate, they came to Boston, and they settled around Beacon Hill in the late 19th century. And so what I'm getting at is this is kind of an American dream story. Lawrence Burke was the firstborn son of Jewish immigrants who landed in Boston penniless and were tailors and with push carts in the street, a hardscrabble life. And then he starts Berklee College of Music, which ends up being probably the best known music college in the world.
Yeah.
And so Lee's importance is that his father took it as far as he could. He got it to have a degree granting charter, and Lee came on in about 1966 after he graduated from Boston University Law School. But it's telling, he never took the bar. I think he wanted the legal background, but I think it was always assumed, he was an only child in a Jewish family, that he would take over the family business.
Yeah.
And his father had really elevated the school. It was doing well, but when Lee came in, his law background and just his undergrad was at Brown University, so he was very, very well educated. And he had experience in really wonderful college environments. And so he wanted to turn Berklee into a college that had some of the hallmarks of the best colleges in the world. And Berklee started, Lawrence Burke's desire was to be the first to grant a degree in American music, which had never happened. All the conservatories in the university music departments were teaching classical music, and I know at New England Conservatory, I have this on good information for people who had this happen. If anybody was in the practice room playing jazz at this classical place, they'd be asked to leave. So the music was not well thought of, and this is what Lawrence Burke decided he was going to run with. He was a complete outlier in the music community, and people disparaged Berklee, but he was insistent on this. And then when Lee came, it was, let's capitalize on all this stuff. And so he started making majors that were the first in the nation and in the world, really. The first film scoring major in the 70s, he did that. There was the first recording engineering major. And both of these became huge departments and turned out incredible graduates. And it went all the way down the line to music therapy, music business, a bunch of different things that were firsts. And Lee he surrounded himself with great people. As I mentioned, the company you keep is a title in there. And he had very good advisors. He was a wonderful judge of character, and they helped him to craft Berklee into what it became.
Wow. When I haven't read that chapter, but I will soon, and it did remind me of a lot of things. When I look back in my life, I was very, very lucky, and this isn't about me, but I was lucky enough to know how to get good people on my team, so I didn't have to do that much work. I just had to take care of them, right? I'm sure Lee probably did that a lot for the people that worked for him.
He took care of people, and he surrounded himself with people he could trust, whose judgment he could trust, and he had an extraordinary team. Everybody who was there, starting with Gary Burton, who has his own chapter for team players. Gary Burton he's a highly decorated jazz vibraphonist. And for those that don't know, the vibraphone looks like a marimba, but it has metal bars. And he got many Grammy Awards and toured the world countless times, dozens of albums, and actually launched a lot of careers. But he was a Berklee student himself at one point, and he came back to teach at Berklee, and then Lee tapped him to be the dean of faculty, because Gary was an expert at all things jazz and music.
Wow.
And Gary said, similarly to my story, where I didn't feel like I might have been totally qualified for the job that I was hired for, When Gary didn't have a deep college background, he spent 2 years at Berkeley, then he went out on the road and made his legacy. But Lee asked him to be the dean of faculty, and Gary was saying, you'll find somebody better, and he's like, no, you're the man. And Gary said, okay, I'll take it, but you'll probably find somebody better in a year or two, and I'll understand. But Gary stayed on and was part of this elevation of the stature of Berkeley.
It's amazing. I wish I had could have met, Lee Burke and I'm sure when I read the book I'll have a better understanding of him. But he sounds like the kind of leader that people want to follow. I mean,
he was, but he wasn't. As Gary Burton stated in there, when Lee became the president of Berklee College of Music in 1979, Gary's words in the book are, Lee might not have been the one that Central Casting would have picked to be a college president. He didn't have that look,
Right.
he was, just your regular guy, but extraordinarily gifted. And Gary goes on to say, he really didn't make any missteps in the growth of the college. There was really nothing that you could say, oh boy, he really messed up on this.
Yeah.
He had a really good run for the 25 years that he was president.
It sounds to me, I mean, I've worked at universities before, and the presidents that I remember, they were always selling and trying to bring money in from the bigger, donors. It sounds like Lee just was himself, and people just wanted to be a part of it. I mean,
he was, and there's a great anecdote in the book. As you'll see in the pictures of the book, Berkeley, when they have commencements, they bring in very big names from the pop and jazz world, which is something that the classical conservatories, they might get a soprano who's with the New York Opera.
I saw Sting in one of the pictures, and the guy from Aerosmith.
Steven Tyler.
Steven Tyler, yeah.
There's pictures of Lee with all these people.
Yeah.
And Rob Rose, who was a very important person in Berkeley's history, said, he told a very great anecdote. He said Lee would just be himself, and he wasn't trying to do like some other people might have tried to ingratiate themselves to these people and become their best friends. And Lee was just, we're teaching you music here, and we're celebrating you.
Yeah.
And he was just himself. And a great anecdote that you'll come to is on Rob Rose's 40th birthday. It happened on the night of the commencement concert, and the honoree that time was George Martin, who was the Beatles producer.
Right.
And so Lee, he was a very, very thoughtful man, and as we said, took care of the people around him. He wanted to mark that milestone, and he had a cake brought to the green room backstage for Rob Rose, and he invited George Martin to come in and sing Happy Birthday to Rob Rose.
Oh my goodness.
And Rob had been teaching Beatles music. He thought he died and gone to heaven. But George Martin sang the traditional way. He didn't sing, I heard it's your birthday.
Yeah.
But
oh my goodness.
Lots of good stories about Berkeley and the people that have come through there.
You had read something to me that could you?
Do you want to read this? This is, again, back to the topic of Lee having the college named after him.
Okay.
And this is in his own words.
Okay.
Because a lot of people don't really know that it was named after a person. They think of the Berkeley in California that's named after the city.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people just think Berkeley, even though it's spelled very differently. Here's what Lee wrote about this. I grew up with Berkeley, and in fact, my father named the college after me, it being my name in reverse. Recently, I learned that many alumni who adored their Berkeley education have begun naming their children Berkeley. So it seems to me like I will have progeny, at least in name, all over the world.
That's great. He was even subtle. He said, at least in name.
At least in name. He was a very modest guy. He was a very observant member, a very observant Jew, as people would say. Strong faith influence throughout his life. When I saw him October 20th of 2023, it was only a couple of weeks after the October 7th incident, the attack on Israeli people.
Right.
And he talked about it. It's always been this way. His ancestors had a hard time living in Russia, and it's just the way it is. But he was very dedicated to his faith. It was a guiding light.
So, I don't know if you expect this or not, but I know you live in Foxborough,
Right.
married, and have some children. Do you have grandchildren?
I do. I have 6.
Tell us what you're willing to share with us about your life now. I mean, you're not with the college anymore, right?
Right. I retired in 2018, but when this book came up, I had been working on the things that I always wanted to do in retirement. And I always wanted to really compose a lot of music. I did all along. And the 9 albums that I have a healthy dose of the music that I've either arranged or composed. So on my way out the door in retirement, the conductor of the Berkeley Symphony Orchestra said, why don't you write a classical guitar concerto, something the orchestra and a guitar would play? And I'm sure he thought, that's a very big undertaking.
Yeah.
And so I'm sure he was kind of thinking in the back of his mind, this is the last I'll hear from Mark. But I said, no, I'm going to do this. And I wrote this piece. He said, make it 10 minutes in length, not too extravagant. But still, that's an awful lot of work to write for a full orchestra. And so I did that. And we went and we started having a couple of rehearsals. And it was ill-fated in that that was the spring of 2020. And we know the pandemic hit.
Yes.
And so the rehearsals ended and the concerts were all canceled. And the work wasn't performed. I'm still working on getting a performance of that. But I went right into composing. And I came out of retirement to do this book. And it was a very intense year. I spent a year writing it. And there was a lot of research involved and talking to a lot of people.
Yeah.
You know, some people at Berkeley have said, because I was the magazine editor for 26 years, I did 83 issues of the magazine.
Wow.
It was a lot of writing and knowing a lot of people in the community. And knowing Lee really well and knowing the community, the staff and administration. People saying, you're the only guy who could have written that book. And I'm saying, well, Walter Isaacson might have done a good job too. He wrote the Steve Jobs biography.
Yeah.
But he probably would have had a heavy lift to gather all the information where I knew right where to go to find it.
Sure. No, that's a great story. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, the book's been out since April.
Right.
And as we're speaking now, we're in June. So it's only been out a couple months.
Right.
And which I think I read that it took you about a year
It did.
to pull together.
I'm, as much writing as I've done, I'm not somebody who dashes things off quickly.
Right.
I anguish over every word. I want it to say just what I want. I don't want people to get the wrong impression by a certain wording and not understand.
Sure.
So I wrote and rewrote and went over and over things to make sure that it read well.
Yeah. Now you thanked your wife. I think I remember in there for taking care of business for you guys. Does she help you with your editing at all, or is that really your sole function?
I would call her in and say, how does this sound to you once in a while? But she took care of things, saying, you should stop now, it's time to eat.
Okay.
Or let's go outside, things like that.
Yeah.
And she kept me sane and took care of everything else so that I could devote my time.
Don't ask me why. This is not even relevant, but my father, he was a very timid guy. He was a nice guy. My mom was tough. And my dad he said one night, when you said it's time to eat, he said to my mom, honey, am I hungry? Did we eat? That was his way of saying, I'm hungry, I want dinner.
That was a nice way.
Just like, I don't know why that reminded me of that when she says it's time to eat,
Right.
Get away from your book. Well, Lee, I could call you Lee now. Mark, I don't have too much more. I mean, we've got a little bit of time. Would you like to share anything else you'd like to share with us that would be of interest? Obviously, where can we get the book, first of all?
Well, the book is available easiest to get it from Amazon.
Okay.
It is in bookstores. It's showing up at bookstores all over the country.
Okay.
And if people are going into Boston, it's at the Berkeley Bookstore on Boylston Street.
Yeah.
So the book is widely available, and I'm hearing from people in the alumni community, and we did, Susan Burke and I, it's worth mentioning that she was indispensable in this process because she was able to give me all the family information that's in there that really kind of warms up the institutional history by knowing Lee's personal life and some of their travails as well as their high points in their lives and everything like that.
Yeah.
She was very, very helpful in doing that. And we are doing some book interviews and book store signings and stuff like that.
Okay.
And we did, it was through Zoom, but we did a thing with WBGO in New York, which is a big jazz station. And it turned out that the host who has a radio show down there now happens to have been a Berkeley graduate.
Oh, wow.
The end of this book has a bunch of stories, little anecdotes that nobody knew about because they were just one-on-one things that
I
Lee
remember
did.
seeing that. I didn't read them all, but I remember seeing
There's some
that.
very kind things that Lee did for people with
wow.
no fanfare. He was never a fanfare guy. And this host, Bobby Sanabria, who's a Grammy-winning Latin percussionist, told his story about knocking on Lee's door once just to say, you know, I'm almost graduating, I never met you, and I think you're an important person. Lee had him in and ordered lunch for them together.
I love it.
That was the kind of guy Lee was.
Yeah, that's...
And so he
that
was
is
very
wonderful.
warm with the students and everybody.
Wow, well, that's very interesting. So the book's out. What's Mark doing now, other than doing these things?
Yeah, so I'm still wanting to get the word out about the book. So we are doing some things. We will have some book events in Santa Fe where Lee and Susan moved after his retirement.
Yeah.
And he never really got out of the saddle, so to speak, with his arts advocacy and stuff.
Okay.
He was tapped by Governor Bill Richardson to be to head a music initiative out there for the state.
Oh, okay.
On behalf of musicians and to bring the profile of musicians in New Mexico up. And then he also helped to start a charter school out there by writing the curriculum, a music charter school. Then they moved to Phoenix, and he was always booking concerts. He had so many contacts, well-placed ones, as well as people like me, who is not as well-known, kind of have a local following, but he invited me out to play in his series too. So he had a whole range of people that he was interacting with in a kind way.
Well, this has been a true joy, getting to know you, reading about you, and I'm looking forward to reading more about you and about Lee when I get my copy of the book. So Mark Small, I want to thank you for coming in today, and it's just been a real pleasure.
Well, thank you very much. I've enjoyed meeting you and doing this today. And
great.
All the best to Foxboro Cable Access.
Thank you. Well, folks, that's it for today. This is Joe Sanders, your host for Around Foxborough. We'll see you next time.